Well, 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 if it isn't myself back again after 4 years. I don't know why I thought that was a good intro. It sounded better in my head. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's been 4 years. I know it's been a long time. I don't have any excuses. Life happens. Life has been happening, but we're back and I want to make more videos, and so we're doing it because they're fun and I have a lot to say. So welcome back. This video was picked by my patrons. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. To talk about Spider-Man No Way Home. I have been drawing a lot of Spider-Man on my Instagram. I was obsessed for a little while. I've died down a little bit now, but I was definitely, my obsession's not gone. It just kind of like transfers to something else for a little bit. But I'm excited to get to talk about it. So thank you to my patrons for picking this. I'm really excited. I guess spoiler alert. It's been a while now, so I don't know if the spoilers still count, but spoiler alert, even though the illustrations themselves are spoilers. So spoiler alert. I loved this movie. I think most people did. I have some issues with it, as I think also most people did, but overall it was a super satisfying movie. Really, really fun to watch. It's been now I've only seen it once. I was not somebody that saw it like 15 times in the theater. I wish I was, but I just wasn't. But it was a very memorable movie that even though it's been a few months since I've seen it, 2 months now, I remember it very vividly and clearly inspired a lot of art for me. This wasn't something that I created like one piece for, although I did create like something relatively bigger. It's the 3 Spider-Men together, and you'll see that in a little bit. But I just drew a lot of random sketches. Mainly because I find Tom Holland to be the most difficult person to draw in the world, ever. Period. He's just really hard to draw. He has a very, very, very unique face. When I try to draw someone realistic, like a real person, not like a book character, I try to gravitate towards features of theirs that are really distinct, because I know I'm not gonna my style's not realistic, so I'm not trying to realistically recreate them, but I'm trying to provide people with cues as to who they are. So Tom, he has a very unique nose and a really unique jawline and mouth, and it's just tough. He is tough to draw. So I don't love any one drawing that I did for this, but I like all of them collectively, if that makes sense. So I figured it'd be more fun to see kind of how all of them are and all the different little illustrations that I made. I'm pretty chaotic with my drawing process. This is not all on one page, so this is really stitched together, and maybe that gives you some insight into how I draw, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who does this. These are all different Procreate files that I am stitching together. I'm not the most organized with my sketches. I try to create those beautiful sketch pages, but it doesn't really work for me, and my brain kind of goes everywhere, or I have a bigger idea and then it doesn't turn out, but then these little sketches come out of it. So it's pretty chaotic, but I think it's still pretty fun to see all these little different illustrations and how they came about. I really was just focused on capturing the characters, capturing Tom, capturing, Andrew and Toby at some point as well. And then also capturing some scenes. So I drew, MJ and Ned and Tom. That was a pose that was tough for me, and it was a challenge, and so that's partially why I picked it. One, because I was sad. You draw when you're sad about it, but also it was just an interesting pose, and I wanted to see if I could do it, and I did it totally from memory. I didn't have a screenshot of it, of the actual scene, and it's not exactly what it looked like. They're definitely more emotional in it, but I liked how it turned out. I think I did a pretty good job just based off my memory. So yeah, I thought it would be fun to just share some of these sketches as I talk about the movie. It's easy to say I love the movie. Obviously, I don't draw things for movies I don't like or shows or whatever I don't like, but I have to say I was not prepared for how sad this movie would be. I saw it a week after it came out, and in Marvel time, that's you know, it's as if it's 5 years later. Like you're already late. It's too late. So I had people tell me that it was going to be sad, but I didn't know exactly what that meant. I really tried to avoid spoilers, but I'll admit I wasn't very good at it. So I did get spoiled of a few things going into this movie. Andrew and Toby being in it, I knew that was going to happen, and I think we all kind of knew that. And then I knew something along the lines of people forget Peter, but I didn't really know what that meant. That was like spoiled to me by a TikTok video, which again, you can't scroll the internet at all if a Marvel movie comes out and you haven't seen it yet. Like you're just gonna get spoiled. But that's a big spoiler now looking back at it that I just got told, and I don't even know. I was like, I don't know what this means. I don't know what to make of this, and I guess we'll see what happens. And I did, and it was devastating. I was absolutely devastated. I remember walking out of that movie being genuinely sad, and it's not the same kind of sad of after like Infinity War, for example. I remember walking out of Infinity War and, you know, everyone's supposedly dead, but you know it's going to be okay. Like maybe there's like a possibility it's not, or maybe someone won't make it, but most of the time you knew, like everyone was like, yeah, obviously in Endgame, they're all going to come back. So your sadness is like, it's not fake, but it's not a genuine sadness necessarily. You're more just like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? I'm so excited to see it. And you're sad that it happened, kind of a thing. This was different. I didn't know, and I don't know if anyone knows how this is going to move forward. I think now we know that there's going to be 3 more movies, but at the time I didn't. That was not confirmed, I don't think, or maybe I just didn't hear it. So I remember walking out of this movie being like, what the heck? Like, this is devastating. Like, I was genuinely sad, and not in like the, haha, this is sad, but I'm excited to see kind of way. Like really, really sad. Thinking this was the end of the trilogy. Or end of just Spider-Man and the MCU in general, because I know that Marvel and Sony have like conflicts a lot of the time. I know that they've resolved that, and I know that they came out saying that they have 3 more movies, and I think to prevent this feeling that I felt. But man, I felt it. I was actually genuinely upset. Thankfully, it's going to be okay. We should have 3 more movies, but I'm still not so sure what's going to happen with like MJ and Ned. It's not the same kind of certainty that I think I felt after Infinity War, and that we all felt after Infinity War. I'm sure it's going to be okay, but it's definitely not as, I'm like, my certainty level is like 60% compared to like 90% after Infinity War. Tom is probably my favorite rendition of Spider-Man. I've loved Toby, and I liked Andrew too, although I think he got, kind of screwed over with the writing. I'm not totally familiar with what happened with his story. The MCU just kills it. The MCU does an amazing job of making these comic book stories, which are inherently a little ridiculous, if we're honest. I don't think that's offensive to say that, and making them really, really accessible to people, especially someone like me who didn't grow up on the comic books, and comic books weren't really marketed towards me, like as a young girl. I'm not that demographic, and I think the MCU really understood how to make a movie that transcends that initial gap that existed with these stories. I mean, the fact that like my parents and myself and we can all go see this together, I think it says something to how well that these movies do and how well they tell these stories. And I think Spider-Man especially is like the pinnacle of that. It's a very accessible story. It's a very relatable story, even though again it's kind of silly. It's this boy who dresses up in a Spider-Man costume. He gets bit by a spider. That's not the point of these stories. The point of the story is about this boy. It's about Peter, and I think we see ourselves in Peter. I think everyone can relate to him. And I think we just can all relate to his innocence, his naivete, but also his good heart. And maybe we don't necessarily relate to it, but we love it. We like to see this underdog of a kid. I think he's someone that we all want to be to some extent, even if we don't relate to him. He's like the pinnacle of what we should be. He's the best of us in some ways, and he's not someone particularly special, but that is also what makes him special, is that he rises to the occasion. So I think that's what makes me relate to him. I love these types of stories. I also just love the kid with the undercover, the secret identity type thing, even though the MCU doesn't necessarily keep that for very long. I mean, Aunt May knows who he is, but it's still kind of a fun dynamic of this kid in high school who gets bullied, but then he's also could in theory beat all of them up, but he doesn't because he's a good kid. But on the topic of him being the best of us, and he's the best of, I think, all the Avengers to some extent. But what I think the MCU does is they really emphasize his innocence again, in his how young he is and why the responsibility that he's given at such a young age it makes it hard for him to make the right decisions. And it's sad that it's that combination of his good heart, but his innocence results in what happens, that he loses everything. He loses literally everyone, and it's devastating considering he is truly the best of all of them, and he just wants to do what's right by all these people. And that was his whole thing, is he just wants to do what's right for his friends and his family, and it ends up being, and for these villains, and it ends up being the reason why everything is taken away from him. I'm not sure what to make of that lesson, to be honest. That's kind of the message of the movie. I don't really know if there's a lesson there. It's just sad. I think it's realistic to some extent that bad things happen to good people. I guess that's kind of what they're saying. But he's taking responsibility, is what this movie ends up being about. Is that before he didn't want the responsibility, or he didn't understand the responsibility. I guess that was Homecoming and Far From Home. In this movie, he's taking it on, and he's making the ultimate sacrifice for that responsibility. But it sucks the journey that he got there, because he really meant well. And I don't think it was his fault that it got to this point, but he takes responsibility for it. So that's kind of incredible. That's a very an adult thing for him to do, even though it really was not his fault as to why it even happened. He had bad adults around him, if we're honest. I mean, I think the biggest qualm with this movie, and I'm not the only one to say it, is Doctor Strange. This man, he could have asked a clarifying question when first doing that spell, and we would not be in this position. Truly. I think that's the biggest critique of this movie, and you can't think too hard about this movie, because if the entire plot stems on the fact that Doctor Strange didn't ask him, hey, who do you want to know, just so that I'm clear? I don't think that's asking a whole lot, and it just goes to show maybe Doctor Strange is just he's not a good parent. He will never be he's not his parent, not his dad, but boy, we could have avoided all of this. So but I also think that's just a little bit of an unconvincing thing. It's fine, because at the end of the day, the movie is so successful in other ways, but also a super frustrating plot point to be the reason why everything goes to hell, essentially. Just ask him. I'll let it go that maybe he didn't ask it the first time, he just didn't think to ask it. Okay, maybe that's fair. But then afterwards, okay, sit down, just stop and be just give me everyone. Not that hard, dude. And then I also will say, so Aunt May's death in this movie was really, really sad. And I hate that they give you a little bit of a minute of hope. Not even, it's 10 seconds of hope. But you know, because they emphasized her getting hurt so much that you're oh, this sucks. This is going to suck so bad. And I don't want to disregard Aunt May's cause in this movie. I think it's a good message that everyone can be redeemed. I'm not denying that. However, I don't think it was Peter's responsibility in that moment, and I don't think that was smart. And I don't think this is controversial. I don't think that's controversial. But I remember sitting in the movie being this is a bad idea. This is just a plain old bad idea. Maybe I'm a bad person, but I don't think this is Peter's responsibility. I think he just needs to get them into the multiverse, get them back to their homes, and be done with it. It's such a nice sentiment to feel like he needs to save them. I understand. But it was not a good idea. It just wasn't, and clearly it wasn't, because it resulted in the end of this movie and what happened. So I think that's an interesting conversation. And like I said before, I do think the theme of this movie was about taking responsibility, but I just don't know if this was his. I just don't think it was. It's tough. This is a really serious topic for a movie about a man who got bit by a spider. Like, this is a tough conversation. But I think that's a good thing. I think it's interesting, and I could be convinced, I guess, either way. At the end of the day, I don't think it was a wrong decision, but I just don't know. I don't know. I think that was putting too much responsibility on him in a place that he didn't need it. So, I don't know. I could be convinced either way. I'm willing to hear other thoughts. I think everyone agrees, though, that it was a bad idea, but who knows? Anyway, thanks for watching and for listening to me talk about this movie. It's always fun. I enjoy doing these videos. You'll be seeing more of these videos from me, I'm sure. I enjoy doing them. I enjoy talking about these stories. I think stories are so important, and that's why I draw, because it's a reaction to these stories. So yeah, comment below if you have any thoughts about what I said. You can join my Patreon if you want more say about the videos I make. Also, you can get a free art print every quarter if you join at a certain tier, downloadables, art of the month polls. It's an exciting place over there, so feel free to join. You can also check out my Etsy store where I sell pins and stickers, and also my Instagram, where if you just want to see my art. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back again with another video soon.